WesWes, y'all.
Kia ora, talofa lava, and welcome to another exciting episode of our rugby podcast, the Counter Ruck, where we dive deep into the world of rugby from the grassroots level all the way to international competitions. In this episode, we'll be discussing some hot topics from the YouTube comments, reviewing the Bledisloe Cup, and examining the recent club rugby action. Additionally, we'll preview the upcoming NPC and make some predictions. So let's get started. We've got our guests from the City of the Future, host of the Pitch podcast, WesWes Network columnist, Ponsonby rugby legend. You can go on and on about him, Mr. Joey Nanai. Joey, thanks for jumping on us.
Thank you for having me once again. It's a pleasure to be here.
Nice, brother. I'll just take care of some housekeeping. So our website, check out our website, www.weswesnet.com, and don't forget to click the support us button on the page to keep the content flowing, and we have some exclusive content available for our supporters, so definitely some additional benefits there. I'll also mention you can follow the Counter Ruck on Twitter and Facebook, so give us a follow and give us a like on there. All right, Joey, mate, what was it now? It's a few weeks back. That was our first episode in around sort of 3 or 4 months. And it looks like, I guess, the wider rugby community missed some of our insights as we had some overwhelming feedback from that 2-part episode. So I wanted to start there as some of our listeners raised some good feedback and good points in the comment section. So I want to give them a shout also, but give you a chance to respond to some of the points raised. So we can't get through them all, but last week we looked at, we looked at the All Blacks eligibility rules. Something that Rog brought up, and we just sort of looked at if it might be time to relax those rules and allow overseas players to play for the All Blacks. Now, primarily we looked at it from the perspective of Super Rugby and the impact that would have on our domestic competition, as essentially the All Blacks mainly stay in New Zealand just to play for the All Blacks. But there is another side to that, as some of our pundits pointed out. So I'll read you some of these comments. We had 2 comments on this one, which really spoke to this. So the first one was from Neville Lamberti, and he said, "Guys, you seem to be missing the fundamental problem that New Zealand have, which is the fact that even if you can keep your top 30 players in New Zealand, the standard of local opposition will not be sufficient enough to keep the top 30 players in good enough condition to maintain the All Black dominance." And another comment here from Trajan2401, "South Africa would never have won the World Cup without the overseas players like Colby. Time for us to start selecting overseas players. We're at a huge disadvantage not doing that, and players are still leaving. So what's the point?" So any thoughts on those comments? Just we spoke from the other side of what Super Rugby will look like.
Yeah, I think, and those are all good. Those are all excellent questions and comments. I think Super Rugby and the NPC are undoubtedly high quality competitions, and they serve as a fantastic platform for developing local talent. And but you've got to excel. In order to excel at the international level, players need exposure to different playing styles. And challenging opponents from around the world. Allowing overseas-based players to be eligible for, say, the All Blacks, that can infuse the team with fresh ideas, fresh skills and experiences. But on the flip side, we've got to ensure that it doesn't come at the expense of developing our homegrown talent. And the comment about South Africa would never have done as well. They didn't have their own, didn't have access to the overseas players like Colby. Absolutely, I agree. For South Africa, right? 2 different countries, 2 different playing landscapes, 2 different governing bodies in terms of rugby. So it's hard to compare one country's rugby and homegrown talent and choice to pick from overseas-based players over another country's choice to allow overseas-based players to be eligible for the national team. So yeah, that's my stance on it. Is there's a flip side. There's a benefit to both. but it also depends. But in New Zealand, I feel like you can do it, and it could work, but to the detriment of local talent.
Yeah, I sort of agree. I suppose the issue is Super Rugby still a good enough competition to prepare these players for international rugby? Because, if you take South Africa out, well, they're out basically. They play that sort of forward-orientated game, and that closely resembles the Northern Hemisphere sort of style. So, like you talk about the exposure to different styles, at least with South Africa was part of Super Rugby, they played differently. Currently, we've got, the 5 Aussie teams, and, they probably don't have enough talent for 5 teams. You add Moana Pacifica, and to be fair, they've been getting a few beatings. So the players look, in my opinion, a little bit off the pace. When you compare them to say what France and Ireland are doing over the Northern Hemisphere. So yeah, I thought that was a good shout, and I was adamant before that it was a bad move, but now I'm sort of 50-50 about it, because there is that flip side to that argument, like you say. Super Rugby will die if they do that, because players only stay to play for the All Blacks. But
Mm.
The competition isn't what it used to be, so the players aren't getting that level of exposure, which is the flip side of that argument. So there's just some good thoughts and good comments there from our listeners. Credit there. Well, so do you still think that it shouldn't be opened up? Do you think that they're happy with the current system?
For other countries, if they feel like they can get an edge, but for us, not so much. I'm of the notion that in New Zealand we have been so spoiled with having levels and tiers and levels of development to the point that you could have an All Blacks 15, an All Blacks B, an All Blacks C, an All Blacks D, right? And still produce high quality rugby that could contest a tier 2 nation or a tier 1 nation even. So for me, New Zealand, compared to other countries, I think New Zealand could get away with leaving that alone, at least for maybe another World Cup or two, and then revisiting, reviewing what the rugby landscape looks like. Because right now there are stats out there, and there are murmurs that other sports are slowly taking the attention away of the kids in the younger grades, who, like basketball, like football or soccer, taking away the attention of the parents of those kids, therefore pushing their kids to follow those sports, which are less injury prone in the parents' eyes,
Yep.
less hassle to get to invest in. So there are a lot of pros and cons, but I guess as a parent of a millennial or whatever the hell they call this generation now, Generation TikTok, um,
Yeah.
I can see why a parent would not want their child to be injured as easily as, say, our generation was. So yeah, for me, I just want. I think the game should stay as is here in New Zealand. Not to say that should be the case for other countries.
Yeah. Yeah. That's another interesting point which I hadn't really thought of, because I think of the All Blacks are in that conversation when you talk about the best teams in world sport. Like if you look at the historical records, the All Blacks are in that conversation. Another team that's in that conversation is the Brazilian soccer team. So they produce all these great soccer players, and because the money's big in Europe and they've opened it up, almost their whole World Cup teams are built from players who play overseas. So those local kids are growing up, and all their idols, none of them play locally. So they're sort of, starved of seeing them. That they could spend their whole life growing up and they'll never get to see their heroes play live. So I wonder what would happen, like if we were to open it up and Super Rugby becomes second rate. All the All Blacks are coming from overseas. What does little Johnny and these new kids coming through? They won't see their heroes and they won't be on their TVs regularly, and you won't be able to go down to Eden Park and watch a game and see them. So I think that could have a longer term effect. Sort of just something I just thought of, just carrying on from what you said about the attention for the future generations. But yes, there's some good thoughts there, and thanks for the comments from our followers. But yeah, one more thing. We talked last week, was it a couple of weeks now, about some of our World Cup prospects, and Joey's your very early prediction of the Wallabies potentially taking it out. Now, I'm not sure, you might have found an ally here, but one of our commenters, Clyde Moore was his name. So he mentioned, where's this comment? He had to say the sting has worn off from losses to Eddie Jones coach teams for two of us, which I guess he's talking about me and Rog. He's on a different level, not sorcery or luck. All great coaches are students of the game. Have you all read his book? So have you read his book? And I also just want his comment, that change from Dave Rennie to Eddie Jones, does that make you a bit more confident in your Wallabies prediction?
Absolutely it does. Absolutely. I mean, I'm not taking anything away from Dave Rennie's coaching ability. I think his time will come. I understand the decision to get him out and get Eddie Jones in, just because of what Eddie Jones has done. You know, he instills hope for I guess a hopeless organisation like Rugby Australia. That's with all due respect, Rugby Australia, if you listen to this episode. The reason why I say that is because Eddie Jones, you only have to look at what he did with Japan to beat South Africa, right, in that World Cup. And in his book, it mentions that that was a game that they targeted years before the actual moment even happened. It was a game that they trained towards, and he had this unshakable belief that they would do that at that World Cup in that moment. They would beat that team, right? And they did it. And in the lead up to it, when he first mentioned it in a public, in a conference, the journalists who were Japanese, when he first took on Japan, when he came out with that prediction, they laughed at him. They all laughed at him, thinking he was joking. He actually was serious, and he kept to it. He dug his heels in and stuck with his vision that this nation, Japan, all they had to do was come up with a strategy, which, history tells us the strategy was be fitter than South Africa, outlast them. And in those moments where, it was the dying moments of the game, Japan was still quite fresh compared to South Africa, right? They ran them all over the park, and the strategy worked for Eddie Jones in Japan. So for that reason, and that reason alone, I can understand why you would get rid of a Dave Rennie, he for me is on the come up. It was quite unfortunate that he was in that position when they had the chance to get Eddie Jones in. Of course, it's for some in Rugby Australia, it would have been a no-brainer. Yeah, let's get Dave Rennie out. He's got heaps of time ahead of him, and he's got some Australian rugby under his belt. He can always come back later. We need to get Eddie now because he's such a rugby brain, such a strategist, that we need to get him in here, and he can possibly do another miracle and win us the World Cup. And that's his goal. He wants to win the whole thing. Nobody believes him now, especially after talking shit in the lead up to this All Blacks match where they lost the Bledisloe Cup again, right? People are probably thinking, why were we believing in this Eddie Jones guy? I've even seen online and in interviews people saying, do we need to get Dave Rennie back? Somebody call Dave Rennie. But, it's like I still, just based on history, I believe Eddie Jones has what it takes to turn this Australian squad around and get some results out of them for this World Cup, during this World Cup. So time will tell. But I still stick with, the glimmer of hope that Australia can do well at this World Cup, even though right now nobody believes it, including possibly some Australians.
Yeah. His record does speak for itself, because he's the guy who gets that last laugh. So you bring up how we talked about Japan. When he was saying it, everyone says, this guy's an idiot, doesn't know what he's talking about, blah, blah, blah. Then he gets the win, and then everyone has to shut up. When he did the same thing when he said England would beat the All Blacks in that semi-final as well. And the form of England was poor, and the All Blacks were looking pretty good. And everyone's like, well, this guy's living in fantasy land. And then he does it, and everyone has to shut up. So I agree with that. So I was a bit, as an All Blacks fan, I was a bit like, holy shit, I don't want to see Eddie Jones coaching. No, I don't want that at all. So that's definitely a factor. So just thanks to all our listeners out there that commented. I haven't had a chance to look at, there was the Foster versus the assistant coaches debate, and they probably garnered the most feedback. But yeah, just for everyone out there, keep commenting, and we'll try to include more of that feedback in upcoming episodes. But we'll stick with that Eddie Jones theme a bit longer, and we'll review the Bledisloe Cup match over the weekend. So the All Blacks won it, I'm just pulling it now, 38-7 in front of 84,000 spectators in Melbourne. So still a lot of love for that Bledisloe Cup matches. And a lot of people thinking rugby's not as popular as it used to be, but 84,000 says a lot. Maybe they were all ex-Kiwis, but mate, what are your thoughts on that that Bledisloe Cup match over the weekend?
Yeah, well, I'm a big fan of those Australia versus New Zealand games, especially when it comes to Bledisloe Cup time, right? And the Bledisloe Cup, it's always a spectacle. No matter how weak one of the two sides may be in the lead up. And, the latest match between the All Blacks and the Wallabies, it didn't disappoint. The scoreline may tell a different story, but, we witnessed some exceptional performances there and some tactical brilliance from both sides. The game showcased the intense rivalry and highlighted for, areas for improvement as the teams progress in their campaigns in the lead up to the World Cup. And, fans like myself can look forward to more gripping encounters in the future. Is how I look at it.
Yeah, I agree with that. That was a good one from the All Blacks, and some players have really nailed down some of those spots in those opening tests. So Scott Barrett, I didn't rate him that highly before, but he appears to have potentially got one of those starting lock roles. And I thought Mark Talia was very good, like he's been all year. So I think he might have got that left wing spot sign up as well. We talked about Frizzell previously. He's been very good. So the 6th jersey, which was up for grabs, I think he's probably got that now. So those are good things to see. But just this win propels the All Blacks above France into second on the rankings. So since Jason Ryan and Joe Schmidt have come on board, that's a comment for you, Rog. I have a bit more confidence in the All Blacks heading into that World Cup. But I wanted to ask you a question just about that locking combination now that I talk about Scott Barrett. What do you think is the All Blacks' best locking combination and how they should use it? Because prior to this, I would have thought that Barrett would be the bench guy with Whitelock and Retallick, the old heads just going to start. But I don't know, Barrett's been pretty irresistible.
Yeah, I definitely wasn't a fan of Scott Barrett until this match, and that's for more reasons than shushing Nick White all game, right?
Yep.
Both physically, mentally, and emotionally. I just wasn't a fan of Scott Barrett just because I thought to myself, oh yeah, he's the runt of the Barrett brothers in terms of talent. But as time has worn on, I slowly have warmed to see what everyone else sees. And in this game just gone, he may not be the enforcer in the way that Brad Thorne was, or even Ruben Thorne, or Colin Meads, or and the likes. But he was for me an enforcer in the way that he's able to produce top quality rugby forward play, but still have the mental fortitude to banter with the halfback and potentially putting him off his game. So full credit to Scott Barrett for that tactic, for that strategy. I thought it played out well. I thought it was a great tactic to have. It did two things for me. It shut Nick White up, but it also got him off his game. So if players have, I guess, the fitness and gumption to do that, go ahead and do it. As long as it stays within obviously the rules of the game and you don't get sent off, therefore looking like a dick.
Yeah. So are you happy with that? Are you happy to go with Barrett and Retallick as the starting combination going forward?
I am happy with that, and it's not a bad idea to have a Whitelock on the bench either. So
yeah. I'm coming around to that way of thinking now, which is I would never have said that sort of even 3 weeks ago before the All Blacks test. So you got to give Scott Barrett a lot of credit there. Good one from the All Blacks. I suppose we'll have a little bit because Bledisloe 2 this weekend, and we are doing this podcast before the teams are named. But do you see mass changes now that Bledisloe sign up? Maybe an opportunity to check out a few other guys before the World Cup? I mean, we haven't seen Samipeni Finau. McLeod hasn't played. Whainganuku's another guy who hasn't played yet. Do you see them making any changes or any of these other guys getting much of a game potentially?
Well, I think this lead up to the World Cup is their opportunity to blood some of these, I guess, new talent coming through with an eye for the future post World Cup. I think it's a nice way for them to test out the combinations that may or may not work. And right now is the right time to do it. I think the coaches obviously have a strategy with an eye for the World Cup, and I think as long as these players are aware that their contribution in whatever way, shape, or form, whether that be as a dirty or as a starting player, I think they just have to stay the course. If they get the opportunity, make the most of it, because you may not get it again. As history always tells us, some guys get one game in the jersey and that's it. We never see them again, or they get 100. So
right.
I think Fozzie and them, they have a plan, but whether or not that plan will land is another story.
Yep. Yeah, it's going to be interesting because this is the last test in New Zealand before I think they got one more test in England, and then the World Cup starts. So there's a lot of guys who are leaving, Bodie and Monga and co, and some of them might want to get that New Zealand send-off. So I know this will be Aaron Smith's last test before he departs for Japanese rugby, and it is going to be played at Forsyth Bar in Dunedin. So I know he'll probably want to play and get that last game on home soil. We probably have to see what Finley Christie and Cam Roigard are capable of before the World Cup. So that could be an interesting one. But and some of these other guys, we don't even know if they're good enough. So selection's going to be interesting. But we'll carry on with the international game. And I'm not sure if you caught much of this one. I only caught a little bit of the highlights. But there was a couple of results that impacted the Pacific. So Fiji beat Samoa 33-19. And with that win, Samoa, they were in the top 10 when they beat Japan last week. And now they've dropped out of the top 10 of the rankings again. So they were 1 week in the top 10. And now Fiji have jumped into 10th, just behind Wales in 9th. So 33-19, I'm not sure if I mentioned that before. That was the score. Not sure if you caught much of that Samoa-Fiji game.
Yeah, firstly, congratulations to Fiji on winning that game against Samoa and the week before against Igaletahi. Pacific Island rugby, it exudes passion and flair, and the recent matches between Samoa and Fiji, and even the Fiji Tonga game that epitomized these traits. Their contests are often full of heart-stopping moments and breathtaking skills, and the flair that we've come to know about Pacific Island rugby over the years, and enjoy over the years. And I saw a Twitter exchange between the two head coaches of Fiji and Samoa, and it was quite classy. They were both congratulating each other and wishing each other the best for the future. And it's nice to see that kind of online maturity. They both have played each other in the past in their careers, so it was nice to see them, showing each other love and respect. And these games not only provide entertainment, but they also remind us of the immense talent that's in the Pacific Islands. Right? It's crucial to support and nurture rugby in these regions to help them reach their full potential on the global stage. Because time and time again, what we're seeing is tier one nations absolutely taking advantage of the talent out of these this region, but not giving back or reciprocating in a way that is, I guess, constructive and productive for those nations that could use the talents and services of those players who, at the peak of their careers, could be offloaded by, say, an All Blacks or a Wallabies, but are of no use to their island nations where they may have been born or they may have some close ties to, so, and want to represent but can't because of some law that prohibits them from doing so. So yeah, it was a good weekend of Pacific Island passion.
Yep, yeah, I agree with all that. I only caught the highlights, to be honest, but yeah, I believe like Fiji, they just flew out the gates. They got off to a really good start. Their hooker, Tavita Ikaneri, I think his name was, he was very good. So he scored a couple of tries. And one thing you could see from the Fijian team, they had that heavy Fijian drawer influence. So I think we are starting to see some of the benefits of that team being part of Super Rugby, which is good to see. But you talk about the tier one nations and what they've taken from Samoa. So it's good to see, and Fiji and other Pacific nations. So it's good to see some of those guys coming back. I think Steve Luatua made his debut, and Charlie Faumuina, I believe, was also a guy who's just started to come through with Samoa. There's a few more guys whose names escape me at the moment who are looking at making themselves available. So, they still haven't got all of their players available, and it'll be hard for them to build those combinations this close to the World Cup. But it's just good to see some of these guys. They're not in the international wilderness anymore. So we talked about the eligibility before. Guys like Luatua and that, once they've taken those overseas contracts, they've almost lost to the international game. So good to see them coming back. And I will say Lala Mapusua just pulling up his record. He's won 7 of his last 9 games. So that's a pretty good for good coaching from him. So well done there. And yeah, good to see Pacific Rugby and the passion, like you mentioned. It's always a good watch, even though they haven't got access to all their best players. And sometimes that means that you're getting some lesser players, so the quality might not be as good as, say, the Bledisloe and some of these other tier one nations, but the passion's unrivaled. So, yeah, good one there. Yeah, well done to Fiji, like you said. But, yeah, we'll take a break for the international game, and we'll look at some club rugby. So we did a preview of the Auckland Club Rugby final. And out of that, we're pleased to announce that one of our regular panelists, who is a couple of our regular panelists actually, who aren't here at the moment, but Saleh, he won a Jubilee Cup. He's a Jubilee Cup champion. And Rog, who's a regular, he's off working, but his Waitemata team, they won. So they won the George Nicholson Trophy after the finals over the weekend. So, yeah, just big congratulations to them too. I think Rog told us that he hadn't won anything since the 90s or something. I can't remember what the date was, but it was something ridiculous. So really big congratulations to him and his perseverance. But Joey, you picked the Rovers. They actually won it, went back to back. And interestingly, you mentioned that University will struggle after their semi-final win against Ponsonby. So they look to have it wrapped up. They were on a roll. and then a late comeback from the Rovers. So, mate, just have you got any thoughts on that one and your prediction about that? About how that semi-final might be have played an influence?
Yep. So, and before I get into that, yes, I do want to also congratulate our two regular panelists, our two regular guests, Rog and Saleh, on your triumphs over the last couple of weeks, and making the final, and obviously winning the final in your respective grades. So well done, brothers. Looking forward to having you guys on in a future, I guess, episode. And I guess shifting the focus back to the club rugby scene from international rugby, universities impressive run, reaching the final after defeating Ponsonby in the semi-finals. It definitely caught everyone's attention because I know that when it comes to Auckland Club Rugby and semi-finals and finals time, you can always bet money that Ponsonby will kind of make it past the semi-final, and if they get to a final, then it's hard to bet against them. But the fact that University beat Ponsonby in the semi-final, I thought that was a great triumph for them. But I also felt like, oh no, history repeats. Where, in my experience, playing rugby in the last 30 years, and what I've heard and seen and even experienced myself playing university and semi-finals rugby under the Ponsonby colours, I don't think I've ever in the last 25 to 30 years, and I could be wrong here, but I don't think University, after beating Ponsonby in a semi-final, have ever gone on to a final and won it. I'm happy to be proven wrong there, but University tend to look at that Ponsonby semi-final as their final, as history says, and I think for them, they, for one reason or another, just like late in that second half against Rovers, they seem to just, at the final hurdle, just give it away. They were in a comfy lead, actually, in the last 20 minutes of that game against Rovers, and somehow they let Rovers win at Waitemata Stadium, Waitemata Park. It's like, what? I mean, that's why the week before, when you asked for predictions, I put my support and prediction behind Rovers, because history does tell you, and for lack of a better example, Adolf Hitler once said, if you ever want to predict future behavior, you only have to look at past behavior as an indicator. So for me, the fact that University, when they beat Ponsonby in a semi-final, they tend to fall at the final hurdle. That happened again, right? So if there were bets last week about Rovers and Varsity, I would have put some money on Rovers. And I probably would have won well. But well done to Varsity for even getting to the final. Their performance was commendable and testament to the talent present in club rugby. As for this very touchy subject to a lot of folks out there, as I saw on the Auckland Club Rugby Facebook page, I was one of those commenters as well. As for the absence of Rovers players in the NPC squad, it raises an important question about selection processes, potential politics that are at play, and, outstanding club level performances should indeed be a pathway to higher level competition like NPC. But other factors, like, let's say, player availability and team dynamics, might influence selections, right? But what is needed by Auckland Club Rugby today as it has been in previous scenarios like this, where a final's been played and the majority of squad selection following the final has been from clubs that, one, didn't make the final, two, did make the final but didn't win the final, and three, made the final but didn't get selected for one reason or another, because traditionally they're probably not seen as NPC level, even though Rovers have proven now, back-to-back winners, the player of the competition played in that final for the winning team. He didn't even get a look in. So it's like, what is the criteria here? Auckland Club Rugby, they need some transparency, for starters, in that selection process. That alone is vital for ensuring fairness and encouraging players to strive for excellence. Because what you do when you keep doing this, what you're doing, Auckland Rugby Union, when you keep selecting players to play for your union who come from rugby clubs that didn't make the final or didn't win the final, guess what? The players from the club that did win the final, they go and play for another union. And they make other unions stronger. Or in some cases, as I've seen in the past, in my own experience under the Ponsonby Rugby banner, they go and play another code, like Rugby League.
Wow.
So there's been instances where, we've won. We had a bit of a dynasty in the 2000s, Ponsonby Rugby. And, a lot of those times where we made a final and we won the final, our players who weren't selected but should have been selected in the eyes of many, including other rugby clubs, they just end up playing league for a local league, Auckland Rugby League club, or they end up playing in another union. So they go out of their way to travel to another rugby union like King Country, like Hawke's Bay, like, counties even, right? So it's kind of hard to justify staying and playing in the Auckland Club Rugby competition when time and time again, Auckland Rugby Union, whoever's making those selections, don't select on merit. So, the question that always comes of these situations is, who's in the boys' club this year? Boys' club meaning old boys' club, meaning old men who have favourites at their rugby clubs that they used to play for, or their son plays for, or their nephew, or their sponsors, or, their partners in business. They're politically selected rugby clubs to align with. So if you're not one of that select few who get to be in the boys' club, who get to be well networked in that boys' club arena, then unfortunately you get left alone as a talented rugby player who has won a Gallagher Shield twice back to back. Your best bet is going offshore in the off season, playing for a nice contract overseas if you can, or trying out with another rugby union. And chances are, because you didn't get selected for Auckland Club Rugby, you won't get selected for another rugby union's top team either. So you'll have to play in grassroots, second tier, secondary level kind of union or province. That's just the way it is. That's how it is in New Zealand. That's how it is because Auckland, or unions like Auckland, they tend to let politics decide. That was a bit long-winded, but yeah, that's my feeling and my stance. And
No, that's good.
I feel for Rovers. Congratulations again to Rovers. Hope you
Yep.
guys are still celebrating.
Yep. Now, yeah, it's because I did have questions. I'm not sure. I have no idea how you get picked for Auckland anymore. I thought that I thought like you said, you talked about the standout player from the final didn't even get picked, and you're like, well, can you even get picked from being outstanding in club rugby anymore? Is that even possible? I remember listening to one of the early back at the 1 through 5 podcast that you jumped on, Joey, talking about how guys have come through the system, and it feels like it's easier to get picked up from almost like the 1A schools competition than it is to be from club rugby anymore. So I'm not sure how. I don't even know how a player gets picked for Auckland anymore. Is it even possible to get picked from after having an outstanding club form? It doesn't feel like that's possible anymore, which is really unfortunate. So how do you, is it you got to be the teenage superstar who's come through the grades? Is that sort of where it's at? Because you can't be a late bloomer anymore, can you? Doesn't feel like it.
Oh, in most cases, no. Um, there have been anomalies and exceptions to that rule, or to that, because you've got guys like Tanya Lamour, who they were late bloomers. They played league all the way up until it was time to play rugby and get noticed and be undeniable. And obviously there was guys like Jonah Long was the classic example. He played rugby late in his career. He was 17 or 18 before he became a rugby player, or 16. And before that, it was league. He was a leaguey. Um, and then, as history tells us, he became the youngest All Black ever to play. So you've got guys like that who are anomalies and exceptions to the rule. And that's just pure out and out talent. Rest in peace, Tanya Lamour, and Jonah Lomu as well. So it's like, unless you're undeniable talent like that, you have to come up through the system. And the only other way that you'll get through to rep sides is just playing the game, the political game, playing the yes man game. Unfortunately, you know, if you're doing all the right things, you're taking care of your body, you're playing in the right teams, winning at the right grades, and winning at the right competitions, and just be exposing your talent to the right people all the time, then yeah, you've got a really tough chance getting in if you're someone who just played well in one sport like rugby league and then all of a sudden decided, oh, I'm 19 now, I want to come and play rugby union and try my luck at getting into the NPC. Unfortunately, there's a long line of developed players and development players who are waiting in line to make it into the NPC, and they will fight you for it. Politically, they will fight you for it. They will do what they can to strategize against you. And unless you're an out and out talent who just scores tries or consecutively hits people into hospital, then you're probably not going to get looked at. Probably just going to be looked at as, yeah, another run of the mill player who's, out of West Auckland or South Auckland and has a bit of talent, but his attitude sucks, right? So everything has to tick the box. Your attitude, maybe even your pedigree sometimes, if you're with the right club, um, your reputation as a hard worker who sponges, off coaches and sponges information of fellow players and just has a really good attitude. That reputation builds for yourself. But other than that, you've got a snowball's chance in hell of making a rep team. That's why
Wow.
anyone who makes a rep team, I'm always like, man, you must have really dedicated yourself to training and working hard and getting into that team, because I know how hard it is to get into those teams. You're not just fighting a selection battle against other players who are vying for that same spot. You're fighting a battle that you don't even see, you don't even get to see behind closed doors. The battle of that's so and so's son X, or that guy comes from such and such a club. Not so much. Oh, he went to that school. They imported all their players. Nah, right? So that kind of politically charged selection process is what's killing club footy, grassroots footy.
Yeah, it's unfortunate, really. Like I had a guy that I've bagged on this podcast multiple times, Reuben Thorne. I think of a guy like Reuben Thorne. So he didn't come through the systems or the academies. He didn't make a single age grade rep team coming up as a kid. He was picked for Canterbury on the back of outstanding club seasons, and he went on to play 50 tests and over 100 Super Rugby games. Now he said himself that he was a bit of a late developer in rugby, but what we've talked about under these current systems, he could have potentially been a guy, if he'd been up here in Auckland, for instance, who just stayed in club rugby and nothing more. And for all his critics, and I've been bagging him relentlessly, he's better than it. So. So it does make you think, how many other players, like you mentioned, Joey, who are good enough to probably play at NPC level or higher, because they haven't sort of come through the right pathways or the politics or whatever, they're just being overlooked, which is really unfortunate for the club game. But I do wonder about where is club rugby ranked. It feels like the 1A school system from a pathway seems to be a bit more, I don't know what the right word, prestigious probably isn't the right word, but it does seem like that's the pathway now to the top grades, not really the club scene anymore, which is unfortunate because I don't know if that was the case sort of back in the days. So club rugby's sort of been left to die a little bit, which is unfortunate. Oh, I can't hear you. Sorry, you're on mute. You're on mute. There you go.
Sorry. Yeah, like it's one that is going to be an ongoing conversation, whether club rugby is still as relevant as it was. And for me, in my era of playing club rugby, it was definitely a necessity in terms of plying your trade, putting in an honest day's work. But back then, we had the luxury of having these professional players and All Blacks even come back and play in our club rugby teams on their weeks off when All Blacks coaches wanted to see them get some game time after coming back from injury, or wanted to give them more game time because they've been on the bench. That kind of scenario was awesome as a club rugby player, to rub shoulders with these professional players who were definitely well known in the game on the club rugby scene, but also pit ourselves against these top flight players who play the level of rugby that we would only dream of as a club footy player. So the landscape has definitely changed in that respect, and there is an expectation by schoolboy rugby stars that they will go straight from schoolboy rugby to contracts, these super contracts. And I talk to rugby player agents all the time, and they say the same thing. These kids come straight out of school expecting a contract once they've left school. And it's due to the fact that, one, you've got jokers like, broadcasters like Sky Rugby or TV1 casting the games for college rugby. And of course, because they know they're on TV, right, they're going to be having higher expectations. They're going to be having this mindset that, oh, I'm already a professional. Look at me. I'm a talented schoolboy rugby player. I'm being promoted. I'm being touted as the next best thing. And you never seen my kind of talent or heard of it, or now it's exposed to the public on a level that, gets me seen by scouts and potential coaches. And now look, what do I need club rugby for? That's just going to hinder my progress, and it's going to make me go, I don't need that. I've already got the skills. I've already got the talent. But I guess it can be likened to, say, someone who's come out of Polytechnic, or they've come out of a university, and they're plying their trade in a field that needs some kind of expertise, that needs some kind of accreditation even, or certification. And in order to get that certification, you need to do either an apprenticeship, a course, or some sort of put in some sort of time and effort towards that certification. And for me, when you use the rugby analogy, that's what club rugby is. That's the apprenticeship. Your apprenticeship is club rugby. And if you don't put in the time in club rugby, when you get to that professional level, or when you start playing rep footy, you don't have, that battle-hardened mentality that will get you through those tough times. Because when you reach the tough times in pro rugby, you'll start making excuses, you'll start acting like a prima donna, you'll start having all these kind of demands and expect, and be entitled. And unfortunately for the team that you represent, you just look like a dick, and you look like a waste of investment. Whereas if you are a player who did the time in club rugby, you actually got a couple of years under your belt before you played rep footy, you are now battle hardened. You've got some experience playing at club rugby level. You've experienced some tough times, because at club footy, you don't win every season. Even a Ponsonby or a Varsity or Rovers now, they're in that conversation now. You don't get to enjoy success year in, year out without hard work, without going through the trenches with your squad, with your coaches, with your trainers, with everyone who prepares you for those glory hunting moments. So club rugby for me is still relevant, but not so much if you're a talented schoolboy rugby star who doesn't see the value in it, because they see themselves as a professional rugby player and waiting. Give me my contract, I'll sign it, I'll go and earn the big bucks and start being a superstar.
Mm, mm. Yeah, I agree with all that. But you're right. I mean, you'd see back in the days, you'd see, the cream of the crop going back to the club scene. So I used to go and watch a lot of club rugby back in the days, sort of 20, 25 years ago, whatever. But and I watched guys like Lee Stensonis play. I watched Dilamika Oreni. He's one of the best players I've watched. He was a beast at that level. But they would come back and play, and that added that value. So if you're a young guy coming through who's got hopes of making it, you can test yourself against someone who's there, and you can see where you're at. You might think, oh yeah, I'm close, and get carved up and think, actually I'm not really that close. And that those days are sort of gone by the wayside as well, as part of it, which is unfortunate too. So yeah, it's I don't know what the future of. I don't want to be all doom and gloom, but I just don't know if that's the pathway anymore, which is unfortunate, because club rugby, it's been around for 100 odd years, and it's been an important part of the stepping stone. So I'd like to see it stay as that, which is so hopefully they can. Auckland Rugby needs to sort something out to get something going on that side. So I agree with all of your comments there, Joey. But have you got anything else you wanted to mention on that before we move forward on to the next?
No. Club rugby, I think I think people just need to know that it has its place, and it shouldn't go anywhere.
Right.
If anything, it should be strengthened in order for the higher teams, including all the way up to the national team, to be strengthened. The club footy needs to be taken care of.
Yep, agree with that. All right, so sort of moving up to that next level, which we've been talking about, the transition to the NBC. We'll have a look at the NBC now. So that actually starts this weekend. So yeah, I thought this would be a good opportunity to cast our eye over the domestic competition. So I got some info from the website. Let me just find it here in regards to the format. So it's a 14-team competition split into two conferences, and the conferences have been split evenly based on final positions in last year's competition. Each team playing 10 fixtures, including 5 home and 5 away games. So we won't go through all the teams, but we'll just get some predictions on the competition. So have you got any thoughts on who you think is going to win the competition, and any reasons why you're thinking what you're thinking?
Yeah, I guess for me and for mine, counties rugby is looking pretty strong this year,
Mm,
and I say that because the last couple of years they've been looking strong, but they've kept the core of their squad, and it'll be bolstered by, I'm biased here. Etienne Nanaise Toro, he's in there. You've got guys like Dalton Papali who will come back. You've got guys like Sotutu. You've got
that's
those players
big in there. Mm.
who will bolster the squad, and just their presence alone will inspire the others to do great things for that jersey. So my pick would be counties to be up there. If not win the competition, at least be in the final. The NPC season's always a thrilling one. It's always a bit of a thrilling ride where, fans can actually expect to see intense regional rivalries, the exciting upsets that happen always, and, captivating performances by individuals and teams. As for the winner prediction, yeah, Counties is my team, but even though it's a tough one to single out, they would be my team and a force
Nice.
to be reckoned with this year.
Yeah, Hoskins, we spoke about him in that last pod where he's probably on the outer with the All Blacks, so that'll be a good pickup for them. I think at this level he could potentially dominate. So that's not a bad shout there on Counties, given Etienne as well. They've got some gun players there, so I quite like that one. I I know I just bagged Auckland Rugby for not doing the right thing by the club, but I'm just going to stick it out with them. Not so much with a lot of confidence, but mainly just that's my team, so I'm just going to stick with them. Even though they didn't pick any of the Rovers, but they're always there or thereabouts. So yeah, I think they've been in the playoffs the last sort of 3 or 4 competitions. So they'll be up there again, I think, and I'm picking them to be the winners. What about a standout player? Anyone come to mind that you think this could be sort of a breakout for them, or any rookies or anyone that we might not have heard of before? Just any player really that comes to mind that you think could
Look,
be for big season.
I'm biased, but at the same time, I'm quietly excited about Etienne Seturo taking a good grasp of this particular season, and the fact that he's made the All Blacks 15. He's I I doubt he's not looking at higher honours. So this is a good way for him to really stamp his mark on the game at an NPC level. And excuse me, I have to sneeze. Excuse me. At an NPC level, and just really showcase his talent, because I imagine he will go through as a starter for the county's team and just
Yeah,
be a star for that team, as well as putting his hand up that, look, Fozzie, I want some higher honours, and if I can be a bolter even for the World Cup, I won't let you down, and here's why. And anyone like that who are on the fringe of, say, a wider squad, this is the opportunity they have to really um, write their name down in that team that goes to the World Cup. So he would be mine, as
yeah,
biased as it is.
yeah. Nice. Yeah, just having a look at their squad, they've got a decent team, eh? Hoskins, like you mentioned, Dalton Papali'i, Alamanda Motunga will be back again, and Cam Roigard. I didn't realise he was the counties guy, but
Hmm.
depending on All Black eligibility. He could be one to watch out for. So good shout there, Anetine. A guy who I like the look of, young Noah Hotham. He's from Tasman, but he's come through the Crusaders in the Tasman system. Still a young guy as part of the New Zealand under-20s program, but I think he's the one. I think he's going to be the one. You know, a lot of people like Cam Roigard, obviously we just talked about. Cortez Ratim is another guy for Lau Whakatawa. But to me, this young guy, Noah Hotham, I think he has the potential to be the next All Black halfback. So a player to watch out for. Another guy who I like the look of, Fergus Burke from Canterbury. They seem to always produce these first fives. With both Bodie and Moonga heading offshore, there's a bit of a vacuum in that 10 jersey for the All Blacks. So I think he could be in the mix from next year on if he can have a big season here. And he'll be playing for Canterbury, who, like Auckland, probably better than Auckland, but they're always up sort of close to the top. And the last guy may be a controversial one. I think Caleb Clark might be a big have a big season for Auckland. I actually think his World Cup spot's in jeopardy, if I'm being honest. I think that, the other wingers, obviously, I think Talia's cemented a spot, and obviously Will Jordan was a guarantee. And if Whainganuku can play good, I don't know if they can carry another specialist wing in Caleb Clark. So he might be one to miss out. And then he might be playing for Auckland, which... so I thought I'd chuck his name in there just as a potential guy who might miss out on the World Cup and end up playing NPC.
Yeah.
As a guy to watch out for.
Yeah, for sure. He needs to. He needs to have a big NPC campaign. For sure.
Yeah, nice. So the NPC is going to be a big watch. It's going to be a full calendar of rugby with the World Cup and the NPC, and they're going to be coming up shortly. So, yeah, the podcast could be a bit full on as well. But we're just about to finish up. One thing that has been neglected, though, has been our TAB account, which I forgot about. I'll have to check how much is in there. I know we're still in the positives. I know that much. But, just for our listeners, because we haven't done it for a while, what we try to do is we get a few predictions, and then we do a $10 sort of multi each podcast based on those predictions with the TAB. So, Joey, mate, have you got anything for our multi? I'll give you a rundown of some of the games. So, just to give you a bit of an idea, we've got the Bledisloe this weekend, obviously. South Africa, Argentina again. I'm just looking at the schedule. Samoa, Tonga, and Fiji, Japan. And some Northern World Cup warm-up games. So Scotland's playing France, Wales, England, and Ireland, Italy, as well as the NPC. So there's a lot going on there. I'll give you my prediction first, just to give you a bit more time to sort of digest all that information. But we're doing this podcast before the teams have been named for the Bledisloe. But this is the last test on home soil, which I mentioned. And for a lot of the All Blacks taking up overseas deals, it's going to be their last ever game in New Zealand. And because it's played at Forsyth Bar, I think they will give Aaron Smith his dream send-off at his home ground. So I'll pick Aaron Smith to score a try on his last ever test at his home ground. I'll go for the romantic one. The romantic pick, mate. Any thoughts on any of that I mentioned for your tip there to our bet?
I think it's going to be because of that emotional factor and the fact that it's been playing at Forsyth Bar Stadium. I think it's going to be a so much closer game than people realise, especially with a lot at stake and Australia wanting to prove a point by winning a game. It's going to be so much closer. So my prediction will be All Blacks by 40 plus.
Ooh. But we'll probably get good odds for that as well. So nice. If that comes through, we could be back in the way in it with that multi. But thanks for that. Also, we'll chuck that on. We'll chuck that on our TAB account this week for the games. We're about to wrap up, mate. Just some final thoughts from you in closing.
Yep.
Yeah, Joey.
Yep. Firstly, I didn't get to do this in the previous episode. But massive congratulations to the South Auckland team, Manu Rewa, on winning the McNamara Cup in the counties competition for Counties Club Rugby. Well-deserved winners, and I heard that it was a nail-biter of a final where they came back in the dying moments. I think the last 4 minutes, where they were behind by a considerable amount, and came back and won by a kick. So well done to Manu Rewa, well deserved. And I guess final thought would be, rugby in New Zealand, especially Auckland, is in jeopardy of losing its, its aura, losing, the numbers in terms of a membership base to sports like basketball and soccer. And if we do truly care about the future of the game, especially in places like Auckland, we've got to figure out how to transition high schoolers to the club rugby game and getting club rugby buzzing again, because when club rugby is buzzing, the NPC is buzzing. And when NPC is buzzing, the international game's buzzing. And when the international game's buzzing, everyone's buzzing. Right now, we're kind of competing with a FIFA World Cup. We're also competing with, eyes on other sports that are easier to play and easier to digest. But if you're a true rugby fan, the best way to grow the game in your own sphere of influence is by talking about it, like we're doing here on this podcast. Mm-hmm. So keep talking rugby. Rugby's the ball. Pass it on.
Oh, nice. I like that ending there, brother. You haven't got much more to add. Just, it's good to see the international games back up and also the NPC starting back up. So, yeah, for diehard fans like us who have been watchers of rugby and supporters of rugby for many years and will be on until probably the day we die, it's good to get into this section of the rugby calendar. So, yeah, thanks. Congrats to, like you said, Manu Rewa. For me being a South guy now, I've always grown up out west, but now me and my wife are living out south with our children, so yeah, real hard for me now. No, but and the Rovers as well. So, I think someone mentioned this in a previous podcast, how South has always had that talent, but a lot of them have played for other clubs in Central and all the rest of it, and topped them up. And even at a school level, you see a lot of those talented South kids going to schools in Central and all the rest of it. So it's good to see some guys staying back at the club level anyway and giving back to their local communities. And that just shows the talent that's out this way. There's a lot of gifted young people out this way. So congrats to both of them. And just thanks also to the people that commented on our YouTube channel and everyone on the podcast. It's most of them have been overwhelmingly supportive and also informative in terms of providing alternate perspectives. So please keep them coming. But that's a wrap for this episode of our rugby podcast. We hope you enjoyed our in-depth analysis and discussions on various rugby topics. Remember to stay tuned for more exciting rugby content in future episodes. And I will say the Counter Ruck is available through the usual podcast platforms, Spotify, Apple Podcast, Stitcher for a little bit longer. I think that's closing down, but there's many more which are available on, and also in video format on YouTube. So keep listening or watching if that's what you're doing, and don't forget to click subscribe. So, Joy, mate, thanks for being part of the pod and sharing your extensive rugby knowledge. We'll do it again soon. Cheers, boys. Cheers, Joy.